Today's symposium will focus on several aspects of the state of the San Lorenzo River. I have to commend the people who worked so hard putting this together because the speakers are amazing. And after today, your understanding will be enhanced by these presentations, so let's get started. First, Lisa Robinson is president of the San Lorenzo Valley Museums. There are two museums here in Felton and one in Boulder Creek, and they are amazing. The types of displays that are brought in by Lisa are highly unusual for such a tiny area compared. And she brings in things that you'll just be in awe of. And the regular displays are also historically very fascinating. Lisa lived in the San Lorenzo Valley since 1990. She spent many years in senior engineering management. And she retired in 2000 to explore a variety of interests, especially things related to history. She holds a BS with honors, a BS with honors in physics with astrophysics from Leicester University. Wow. She's been president of the board of directors of the San Lorenzo Valley Historical Society, which owns and operates the museum since 2008. And she is amazing. Remember those wonderful books called by Arcadia Press that have lots and lots of photographs with information in them? She's the one who put it together for the San Lorenzo Valley. So look for that. It's available at the museums, by the way. So she's been honored by the county. There's so many things to talk about her, but let's let her talk, because she's going to tell you about the San Lorenzo River Watershed cultural history. Lisa.
Now they gave me 20 minutes to talk about the cultural history of the whole valley, so if I don't touch on something that you were expecting me to touch on, that's why. Now the native people associated with this area belong to the Waswas language group, and at least 3 tribelets were associated with the San Lorenzo River and valley. They were the Sayanta, living by Zayante Creek, the Achistaka, living in the vicinity of Boulder Creek, and the Yupi, living at the mouth of the San Lorenzo River. The Yupi called the area around the mouth of the river Aluntak, the place of the red abalone. Before contact in 1769, they lived and managed the land here. In the words of archaeologist Mark Hilkemer, their legacy was to maintain a stewardship role of the land, such that abundant and healthy natural resources were perpetuated. A landscape where redwood trees could attain a ripe old age and stately oak woodlands could in truth be called orchards. The first native convert was brought to Mission Santa Cruz on October 9th, 1791 to be baptized a Catholic. She was an 8-year-old girl from the Achistaka tribelet. At the mission, the native people were forcibly detained, poorly treated, and their way of life was obliterated. During the Mexican period, in 1834, the mission was secularized. The native people, now greatly reduced in numbers, found it hard to return to their former way of life. Their land was viewed as uninhabited and available to ownership. During the Mexican period, 3 land grants were awarded in the San Lorenzo Valley: Rancho Zayante, Rancho Cañada del Rincon on El Rio San Lorenzo, and Rancho La Carbonera. This is a map of the Santa Cruz Harbor in 1853. The land use around the mission had been altered to support the needs of the mission, with orchards of non-native fruit trees, non-native vegetable gardens, and pastures of non-native grasses for the livestock. The upper San Lorenzo Valley, now untended, became almost impenetrable. The San Lorenzo River was considered a formidable power source, and during the early years of the American period, from 1848, it was considered all the power the area would ever need. Let us look at a few of the industries that relied on the power of the river for their industry. These are industries that at least initially solely used water power. Steam came later. Lumber. The first sawmill in the county was Isaac Graham's mill on Zayante Creek. It was built by Peter Lassen of Lassen County fame in 1841 on a section of the creek that was deeply cut with a natural rock feature that was used as the foundation for the mill dam. It was about 250 feet upstream of where Bean Creek enters Zayante Creek. Leather. One of the first industrial tanneries was operated in 1843 by Paul Sweet near Mount Hermon. Paper. The San Lorenzo paper mill once stood close to the entrance of Paradise Park. It was established in 1860 by Henry von Valkenburg. Powder. This is a really important one. The California Powder Works was the first explosives manufacturer in the West. Powder was being shipped around the Horn from the east, and it resulted in a damp, poor quality explosive and at an exorbitant price. Shipments of explosives to the West were stopped during the Civil War because of the potential that they may be captured by the Confederate forces. Since explosives were crucial in the mining industry and for infrastructure development such as road and railroad construction, the lack of high-quality explosives was damaging California's growing economy. The Powder Works incorporated in 1861, and in 1863 the company purchased 222 acres of Rincon Rancho. The property was adjacent to the paper mill. Hydraulic mining. An 1863 map of gold company operations on Ben Lomond Mountain also labels hydraulic mining as taking place on Gold Gulch. Later, a few of these companies would use water-powered stamp mills to extract what little gold there was from the quartz diorite. Fuse factory. In 1869, a fuse factory was erected on Zayante Creek in Felton. The machinery was driven by 3 5-horsepower water wheels. The water was supplied to the factory by a flume from a reservoir fed by water from Bean Creek. Other industries were also making their mark on the watershed through industrial harvesting. Tan oaks felled for the leather industry, redwoods felled for the lime and lumber industries, that's the 3 L's, lumber, leather and lime. And willow, alder and madrone for the powder works, and that was for charcoal. The site for the paper mill was chosen because of the abundance of straw and lime, the water power of the San Lorenzo River to drive the mill. The machinery consisted of 3 rag engines that converted straw into pulp and was driven by 2 overshot wheels, each 20 feet in diameter, producing 60 horsepower. The San Lorenzo River was dammed and the water was transported to the mill along a 3,600-foot flume that was 3.5 feet deep. At the Powder Works, the San Lorenzo River was dammed about half a mile north of the property, and water was transported from the dam by a ground-level box flume through a tunnel through the Hog's Back and distributed via a raised flume throughout the works. The tunnel was required in order to ensure a sufficient head of water and hence sufficient water power. In fact, the deed of covenants gave the works the right to, and I quote, keep a dam at the head of the survey at sufficient height to flow the entire water of the river through the tunnel. After passing through the machinery, water was returned to the river. Water power drove machines in the pulverizing mill, the composition mill, the mixing mill, the press mill, the corning mill, and the glaze mill. There were 6 center discharge wheels, 1 each in the mixing mills, 1 each in the press mill, the corning mill, and the glaze mill. Hydraulic machines, such as in the press mill, use water under pressure to transmit power. The water wheels were mounted horizontally in the ground in pits, 20 feet deep. It wasn't until 40 years later a study on the effect of the operation of the fish was conducted. They found, to their surprise and dismay, in a 3-day experiment in 1905, that half of the 15,000 salmon that flew through the flume and machinery were killed. A screen was installed over the mouth of the flume. In 1862, the Homestead Act was passed. Vacant public land was divided into 160-acre parcels. Any US citizen could apply to and settle on one of these parcels for free, as long as they were willing to improve the land. The first Homestead Act settlers came to the San Lorenzo Valley at this time. In 1866, the journals of the Senate and Assembly reported, the lumbering interests extend the length of the county, but at present are confined to the streams. There are large bodies of redwood not as yet accessible. When needed, the indomitable energy of our lumbermen will make roads into them. Slowly the land was settled and the roads built. By the early 1870s, it was obvious that an alternate method was needed to transport the cut lumber and other products such as powder and lime to the wharves in Santa Cruz for shipment. A railroad was built from Felton to Santa Cruz and a flume from just north of the town of Lorenzo, now South Boulder Creek, to the railroad depot in Felton. These were fluming times. Man-made channels used for conveying water built above the ground they were used to provide water for agriculture and mining, to generate power, to transport cut lumber. Pictured here is the San Lorenzo flume and the Pacific Mill crew. In general, flumes for transporting cut lumber can have advantages over a railroad. They occupy less space and require narrower cuts, lower construction costs and lower operational costs. They can easily operate in steep and rough terrain, but their disadvantages are that they are less robust and have an inability to transport lumber uphill. The San Lorenzo Valley environment challenged some of the typical advantages, particularly slope. This is the Flume Railroad Transfer Depot in Felton. There were reports of people fishing in the flume. The sawmills relied on the river and creeks not just for power. The creeks were dammed to create mill ponds. These were used for storage. And also, since oxen dragged the logs from the place they were felled to the mill, they would need to be cleaned prior to being sawn. This is homesteader Joseph Peary's boulder mill. Peary founded the town of Lorenzo on his homestead, now South Boulder Creek. He also operated a tannery at the site. In an 1891 report, he states that he had been in operation since 1869. That's a long time for a mill on one site. And that they worked 72 hours per week in the summer season, but reduced hours, 54 per week in the rainy season. By the late 1870s, the expanded milling operations were now really affecting the river and the creeks. The water was undrinkable and the fish life was declining. It wasn't just the dams, but the practice of dumping sawdust into the river. In 1880, the railroad crossing the Santa Cruz Mountains from Los Gatos to Felton was completed, and so began the tourist period. Families came to escape the heat, to camp, boat, and fish by the river all summer long. In 1885, the railroad was extended north to Boulder Creek. The camps extended north too. It was also during the mid-1880s that the Chinese laborers that were building much-needed infrastructure and working in the lumber industry endured a toxic environment, as the anti-Chinese movement in the San Lorenzo Valley was very strong. In 1880, they made up 21% of the population of Felton. At an anti-Chinese meeting in Felton in 1885, Henry Baxter stated that at present there were now just 6 Chinamen employed in the vicinity of Boulder Creek and that they intended to get rid of them. 1 year later, there were none. Soon hotels and summer cottages sprang up along the river banks. They boasted boating, nature hikes, fishing, and other recreational amenities. It should also be noted that there were sulfur springs, a hot spring, and artesian wells in the valley at that time. Fishing was a huge attraction, with catches ranging from the teens to the hundreds and even thousands, with the caveat that the rivers were now being stocked with many thousands of fish. In 1885, 10,000 trout were placed in Boulder Creek with, I quote, 40,000 more to stock other streams. And in 1893, 10,000 eastern trout were given their liberty in Boulder Creek. The Brookdale Fish Hatchery opened in 1905, and it was operated jointly by the California Fish Commission and Santa Cruz County until 1912, when the operation was taken over by the state. The eggs for the Brookdale Hatchery were obtained from a spawning station at Scotts Creek. In the first year, it raised 1 million trout. The tiny fish had to be released into the streams early that year, as the growing ponds had not yet been built. As the game in the river continued to deplete and fishing became more restricted, private trout farms became popular. There was construction of a trout farm in 1913 on Zayante Creek, close to the Olympia train station, by Isaac Miller. Several concrete ponds of various sizes were built to propagate fish of different sizes. Water was supplied from Zayante Creek by means of a flume. In March the following year, 360,000 fish were reported hatched. In 1928, the Olympia Trout Farm and Club was described as the most unique place in the Monterey Bay. You could catch your own trout and cook them on the club's outdoor grill, or have them cooked for you in the clubhouse. At the other end of the valley in Boulder Creek, the concrete ponds from Rainbow Trout Park on West Park Avenue can still be seen today. This trout farm was opened in 1851 by Peter Horvath, a former San Francisco restaurateur. There were no limits on the catch, and for those who didn't have any fishing tackle, that would be supplied. There were 11 fish ponds and cottages to rent. During the early 1900s, there was a period of growth, as land was subdivided and park-like resorts sought to attract people to purchase summer homes. These subdivisions gave rise to many small, independent water companies. For example, in 1908, a concrete dam was installed on Bear Creek for the Bonnie Briar Land Company. Eventually, these summer cottages became year-round homes. In 1914, the movie industry came to the valley, and in 1915, a movie set was constructed on land owned by the Boulder Creek Electric and Water Company close to Foreman Creek. The early 20s saw a boom of movies being filmed on location in the valley, many featuring the rivers and creeks and local inhabitants as extras. In 1922, for the movie Broken Chains, they constructed a dam over Boulder Creek. The movie Soul of a Beast is pictured here on location at Junction Park in 1922. After World War I, the flu pandemic motivated people to escape the dense cities for fear of infection. Many sought the relative solitude of the San Lorenzo Valley. Swimming holes were immensely popular. In 1893, sandbags were placed across the river just below the railroad bridge in Santa Cruz to create a deeper swimming hole, and springboards were placed on the west bank. Pictured here on the left is the swimming hole at Siesta in Brookdale. Some holes were augmented to be more like a swimming pool, such as at the Ben Lomond Community Swimming Hole, created by damming the river around 1931. In 1935, to allow for opening the pool earlier in the season, a temporary fish ladder was installed. In the 1890s, dams without fish ladders were not popular with the fishermen, and in 1897, dams in both Boulder Creek and in Ben Lomond were blown up with dynamite. It was described as a fishy transaction. This is the dam just over the river below Junction Park. The bridge over the river was replaced by a concrete structure in 1941. And here we have the new bridge in the 1950s during the Timber Days fishing derby. Timber Days actually operated it wasn't just all like Boulder Creek Days, it operated all down the valley. In 1956, 1,000 competitors caught an estimated 2,000 trout. Some of the trout had been tagged with a metal tag. If you caught one with a tag, you won a prize. Skipping forward a few years, we enter a new era. Loch Lomond with the Newell Creek Dam is opened in 1963. This postcard from the late 1960s reads on the back, "This is near where we live. We think our drinking water comes from there," which it didn't. "The water in Oakland tastes better. They're still trying to get rid of the hippies up here. Some of them are real frights and very dirty." So now we enter not just the counterculture hippie era, but a time of change, of a youthful generation questioning authority, trying to live in harmony with nature, and the birth of modern activism, some of whom are still activists today. Thank you.
Wow, these are time for questions. Wasn't that amazing? What did you learn that you didn't know? Everything. Wow. So please, if you have questions for Lisa, now's the time. Chris.
Question, where was the hot spring? Or hot springs?
There was a hot spring on Two-Bar Road,
Oh,
just down the Two-Bar Creek, basically. Yeah.
and it's not there anymore?
No, it's not there anymore. There were sulfur springs at Mount Herman and in downtown Boulder Creek also. Not there anymore. Yeah, artesian wells in many places which have gone.
Takes one earthquake to undermine that kind of.
There was an artesian well on Brimblecombe, and Roberta Roca, who is a Brimblecombe descendant, remembers it as actually supplying the water to her home.
More questions? Yes.
Yeah, I have a question about the hatchery. That closed because of the fire, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't
Okay,
quite.
a little bit
I
louder.
was saying, I had a question about the hatchery. Did that close because of the fire? And were there water on the...
I honestly don't remember the reason why it closed. Maybe somebody here knows.
Yeah, I knew the last hatchery manager at the Brookdale hatchery, and he said the reason they closed it was because they had introduced whirling disease to the native population of steelhead there. That's why they closed it. The water came from Clear Creek. They had a pipe that went from Clear Creek all the way over to the hatchery.
What's actually quite neat on the old maps is when you look at that region, before the hatchery was built, they actually had what they classified as a fish pond.
Yeah, they had a series of ponds there at the hatchery. It closed in 53 or 54.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa. Bravo.